chapter learning of a two-part seminar on dyslexia. If you have not watched part one, I would suggest that you go back to part one and watch that. Otherwise, much of what we will discuss in this portion of the seminar will not make sense to you. So as I've done earlier, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my PowerPoint presentation with you. Okay, and as I said earlier, this is part two. What we're going to discuss in part two is how we go about correcting dyslexia, what is symbol mastery, what are the post-program obligations for parents after the program, and what are the average reading gains as a result of attending this program. So how do we go about correcting dyslexia? Well, the first thing we do is what we call orientation counseling. Orientation counseling is going to stop the letters from flipping, jumping, moving, going blank, whatever it is that is preventing the student from being able to see the two-dimensional symbols on the page clearly. There's a couple different ways for me to teach orientation counseling. It will depend on the age of the student and the maturity of the student. After the orientation counseling, what we're going to do is we will do a kinesthetic counseling, which they will be working with their balance and then orienting their feeling sense. And then the third counseling we will do is what we call orientation, auditory orientation. And by orienting 3 out of the 5 senses, the student will have a greater probability of understanding and assimilating the information and reading and focusing by having all of that information oriented to 3 out of those 5 senses. We'll get a better chance for the student to understand and comprehend what is going on in the world around them. So then what I have to do next is I have to tell you the rest of the story. Ron Davis went back to California. He hired Dr. Fatima Ali, who has a PhD in education, and they spent 12 years researching into what dyslexia is and what he did to himself in the hotel room that weekend. What they did is they came up with this orientation counseling, which is working on the visual orientation. He called in his adult friends and he said to them, he's going to teach this orientation counseling. I want you to go home and read. They came back in discussion format and Ron said, how's the reading going? He said, well, they said the reading is going fine, but what's happening is we're coming across some words that are causing us to disorient. We're disorienting, and then we have to go back and reorientate and then read again. We come across another word that causes us to disorient. Ron said, wow, I don't know what to do, but why don't you go home and write down all those words that are causing you to disorient? So they did. And these 20 adults came back with the same group of 219 words that were causing them to disorient. And Ron said, wow, we have to do something with this to stop the disorientation. So what Ron decided to do is he decided to use clay in order to clear up the disorientation. So what he's done is he's termed that process of using clay to clear up the disorientation symbol mastery. So what these students need to do is they need to perform symbol mastery on 219 of the trigger words that cause disorientations in the dyslexic. Why clay? Creativity is an essential part of the learning process. Mastery requires creativity. Dyslexics learn by creating. If they create something, they understand it, and therefore they master it. Once something is mastered, it becomes a part of their intellect. It becomes a part of their thinking process. Clay enables dyslexics to bring their understanding into the real world, into real time. So to understand symbol mastery, you have to understand that the dyslexic needs to know what a word looks like, what it sounds like, and what it means. Now, to a left brain word thinker, they know what a word looks like because it's not flipping, jumping, or moving for them. They know what it sounds like because they use phonics to be able to pronounce the word. But I really wonder if they know what the word means. For instance, can you tell me that the definition of there is, as in the cup is there? Want to give it a try? Well, by about the third day of the program, the letters have stopped flipping, jumping, and moving for the students. The student will look up the word there in the dictionary. If they don't have dictionary skills, I need to teach them the dictionary skills, okay? Then they look up the word, we talk about the definition, we banter it back and forth, we make up sentences using that definition, and then the student goes ahead and he models the definition of the word. The doggy is in or at that place there. Now, when the student is at their creative best, they're at their dyslexic worst. So what we have to do is we have to then stop. We have to make sure that the student has their visual orientation, their visual orientation where it needs to be. And then he will close his eyes and he'll spell the word forward and backwards and forward. With his eyes closed, he will also tell me the definition. So what the child is doing here, what the student is doing here, is they're using their hands, their eyes, and their concepts and the concept of the word to understand what the word means, or in other words, they are mastering that word. So that when they go to look up the word when they're reading, the letters won't flip, jump, move, or wiggle. They know how to pronounce the word because they will have pronounced it in the dictionary. They will have used their hands, their eyes, and concepts so they can spell the word now. They can use the word appropriately in their sentence structure, and they can see it when they're reading. So they will have mastered that word. Not to be confused with the word there, meaning belonging to them. How many adults get there and they're wrong? How many adults get it wrong when they're texting? Quite a few. So now if we go back to our sentence that we used earlier, the brown horse went to the stone fence. Does anybody know what the word, or the definition of the word the means? The means that one that is here, or the one that we're speaking of. So in other words, the brown horse, that one brown horse, not the 7 gray horses out in the pasture, but the brown horse went to the stone fence, or that one stone fence. So again, the students, as they go through and read, the letters will have stopped flipping, jumping, and moving, and they will understand what the meanings of the words are as they're reading them, and they can also, if they choose, put a picture to the word. Now, I'm going to teach other tools to your student other than the orientation counseling and the symbol mastery. But what's going to happen is that by doing that, symbol mastery allows the dyslexic to master words that had previously caused disorientations and mistakes in their reading and spelling. Okay. Now, the big thing I want you to take away from this slide is that in that 1-week program, I will teach your student the tools to enable them to become effective, and will also be able to enable them to correct dyslexia. But dyslexia will not be corrected in the 1-week program. Dyslexia needs to be corrected within the next year. We ask you to do that symbol mastery on the sight words for that next year, and that's what will correct the dyslexia. What you will be doing is we ask you to spend an hour a day, 5 days a week with your child or your adult, and to do 15 minutes of two 10-minute sessions of reading with your student, and do 2 words in clay with a student, hopefully 10 words a week, and by doing words consistently for the next year is what will correct the dyslexia. So what's going to happen as a parent, your role is going to take on a whole different meaning. Instead of pulling your hair out and having the child run to the bathroom and slam the door because they don't want to be doing their homework, what's going to happen is you're going to be sitting across from the child and you're going to be looking for their disorientations. You'll gently stop them and say, wow, looks like you disoriented because you made a mistake in your reading. You will then, as a coach, be coaching them into what type of tool they would like to use to correct their disorientation. If they just want to close their eyes and orientate at their seat, if they want to do the couche pose to create the kinesthetic and the visual orientation, or if they want to take a break. But what you're going to be doing is you're going to be more of a coach, and you're going to be coaching them into which tools will be best for the situation at need. It's very easy to say that, for me to say that the student will gain on average 2 grade levels in reading during the 1-week program. Certainly for some of the younger students, exceptions will apply. Some of the others, from some of the older students, some of them may gain up to 5 grade levels in reading at the completion of the 1-week program. And certainly the reading doesn't stop there. You will continue to see reading gains for the child or for the adult, you know, as time goes on, as they continue to hone in their reading skills and continue to be able to recognize words as they're meant to be read on the page. What you're seeing here is some statistics that are compiled by our friends in Calgary, Canada, and they had compiled this information over a year of many of the students that they had worked with. Just to give you an idea of how my summer went last year, I had a 13-year-old boy who was in the 8th grade. He started the week reading a 3rd grade reading level. He jumped to a 7th grade reading level at the end of the 1 week. Then I had 2 11-year-old boys who were both in the 6th grade. They went from 3rd grade reading level to 7th grade. 14-year-old girl who was in the 9th grade. She went from 4th grade reading up to 8th grade reading. 9 and 10-year-old boys who were both in the 5th grade went from 2nd grade reading level to 5th grade reading. A 7-year-old girl who was in the 2nd grade, she went from pre-kindergarten to 1st grade reading within the 1-week program. So again, I'm not looking for speed in the reading. What we're looking for is we're working for accuracy and comprehension of the reading. So again, some of the schools just want to work with the speed, but that is not what we're going to be working towards. We're going to make sure that the student understands all the words that are being read at that particular grade level. Some parents bring their students in, they say, well, my child can kind of read, they can kind of spell, but they can't comprehend. And as I had mentioned earlier, when I was showing you examples of what it may look like to the student for the reading, and there was one reading that looked kind of like it had water blotches over it. You know, again, that's what I think, you know, their reading may look like. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the orientation counseling to make sure that the mind's eye will stop wandering and they'll be able to see accurately the 2-dimensional symbols on the page. Then when we get into the reading process, the 3rd step in our reading process is comprehension. Now, sometimes the students, maybe they're in 9th grade, they come in the beginning of the week reading the 5th grade reading level. And maybe during the week, they'll get up to a 7th grade reading level, which is where the vocabulary is and where they know the definitions of the words are at. And so what I'll do is I'll stop right there and I'll switch them over from just reading to gain reading levels. We'll switch them over to the 3rd step of the reading process, which is comprehension, because these students at the 9th grade level certainly need to be able to comprehend what they're reading. And so they will eventually, and they will continue to gain in reading grade level. But again, we want to push the comprehension for these upper grade students faster than that. Also, what we'll do with the students, we will not only work with the symbol mastery on the trigger words, but for instance, this is a 6th grade reading passage, and when this boy was done, and he was about 15 years old when he was done reading, I asked him if he understood what he was reading, and he said no. He said that's just the problem. He says I'll sit down with my friends and we'll study together and they'll get it, and I won't understand any of what I'm reading. And so here he did, you know, symbol mastery on the Egyptian social pyramid, and he can give you a complete dissertation on this whole Egyptian social pyramid. So he will have comprehended everything he read. Quite often when the students are a little older, and at the end of the week, I will ask them to bring in their school books, and I will show them how to study using the new tools that they have learned all week. I will show them how to study for their classes. And there was one boy from the Spring Lake area. Of course, his mom is an English teacher, and he was flunking all of his classes. He was getting straight D's in all of his classes. He wanted to be able to go to MSU. He wanted to be able to play lacrosse, but he knew he wasn't going to get there with the grades that he was getting. So he brought in his biology book, and he was at the place in his book where he was reading about cell chromosomes. And I said, well, do you remember cell mitosis? He says, no, I don't remember a thing about cell mitosis. So we sat down and he did the 7 stages of cell mitosis in clay. And when his dad came in on Friday afternoon for support training, he said, Dad, let me tell you all about cell mitosis. And he went through a complete dissertation on that. And his dad said, you have got to be kidding me. How long did it take you to make this? And I said, well, maybe about 40 minutes. And stuff. And he said, do you mean to tell me that in 40 minutes he learned more than I have been trying to tell him for months about cell mitosis? And I talked to the dad about a week after the class, after the program that he went through with me, and I asked, how is it going? And Dad said, well, the next thing he learned in biology was the brain. And he said he had the whole brain in clay, and he had all the parts of the brain all labeled in clay, and he did symbol mastery on all the parts of the brain, and he got 100% on his biology test. Talked to the dad several months later. I said, how's it going? He said, I don't know what to do with myself. He said, I have spent years every night sitting down doing nothing other than working with this kid to try to help this kid learn. And here he is doing it all on his own, modeling everything that he needs to learn in clay, acing all of his tests. He said, I've got a new problem. He says, I don't know what to do with myself. And that's a good problem to have. Many of the parents will bring their children in and they will say, well, the school diagnosed my student as ADD. Recognize that if you put the characteristics of ADD side by side with the characteristics of dyslexia, they are exactly the same with the exception of cannot sit still. Both of these disabilities are a result of being right brain picture thinkers. If you see down here, this line across here, I adapted from Jeffrey Fried, author of Right Brain Child in the Left Brain World, and this line across here represents the spectrum of the brain. Over here we have the left brain word thinker, or that 70%. Over here we have the right brain picture thinker. Notice for the left brain word thinkers, there are no disabilities over here. All of the disabilities are within the right brain picture thinking individual. Dyslexia is the first, where the student is disoriented probably about 20% of the time. Then we have ADD or ADHD. This student disorients not only with letters on the page, but what's happening is they're using their ears to learn more often than they are using their eyes, because their eyes have failed them, they're using their ears. And these are the students when a pin drops on the floor, somebody walks in the hallway, a train goes by, this student is paying attention to every little sound in the room, and they're becoming distracted by that. And then, of course, on the far right spectrum, we have autism, anything from the high functioning to the savant. And again, these are all a result of being a right brain picture thinker. So when your child comes in with ADD, the first question is are they ADD because of the inability to read? Quite often that could be the case because of the anxiety and the low self-esteem. They may have to maybe even move and wiggle around in order to be able to see the letters on the page. Or maybe it's just the anxiety that they know that they can't do the same as others, so they may act out. That's a good possibility. I always ask the parent if they've worked with the diet, if they've eliminated sugar, gluten, or some of the food dyes. Quite often that will calm the student right down. We also have to check into what's going on in the home environment. Is there an abusive situation, or is there some stress or strain within the home environment that could be causing the ADD? But in the cases for the student who's ADD and also for the autistic student, what's going to happen is I'm going to use the auditory orientation a little bit more frequency than I would if a person just has a reading disability, because we just seem to hold on to that just a little bit longer. Once we get the auditory orientation in place, a lot of those ADD symptoms seem to calm down. Now, as I talked about earlier, one of the symptoms of dyslexia is dysgraphia. This is an 11-year-old homeschool boy. He came to me reading, and he was in a fifth grade. He came to me reading at fourth grade reading level. At the end of the week, I stopped him at the 8th grade reading level. Very, very intelligent boy. But I just thought that, maybe it would be better for mom to continue working with him up through the grade levels in reading and for her to decide where he should be. But again, she didn't bring him for reading as much as she brought him for his dysgraphia. Can you read what the boy has written? The mailbox has a secret compartment. On the outside is gray and rocky, etc., etc. This is what the boy's handwriting looked like at the end of the 1-week program. Again, you can see him starting to struggle in the beginning, but as you look at the bottom of the page, you'll see capitalization, you'll see good spacing, you'll see punctuation and whatnot. And of course, mom says, I can tell when he's disoriented because his handwriting goes way off. So what makes this program different from others? It was created by a dyslexic to correct dyslexia. It wasn't created by a left brain word thinker. We teach the students how to orientate, which is something that we do that no other program does. Some of the other programs try to copy us, try to use modeling words in clay without having that student oriented, and so it really turns out to be just a waste of their time. This is a non-phonics program. Phonics will confuse a student. Once the student becomes confused, then they will disorient and then they won't be able to read. Phonics is a very confusing way for many students to learn, particularly because of the number of phonemes. There's 44 phonemes for 26 letters of the alphabet. And for instance, scent has 4 phonemes in it. So again, phonics only confuses the dyslexic, and then they will become even more disoriented as a result of trying to learn phonics. And we correct the root cause of the disabilities. We don't remediate. And remediation can be done in many schools. They may have somebody, they may have a scribe writing for the child. They may have a scribe taking notes for the child. They may use assistive technologies such as Dragon Naturally Speaking, to have the child dictate into a speaker and then have some kind of assistive technology type out the paper for the student. So again, we don't remediate. The schools may teach that. We teach a student to think the way his mind works. And the program for the older students is completely, it's something that they can do on their own. And so that they can become responsible for their own homework and homework reading assignments. The program, the child needs to be drug-free. We cannot be taking any psychotropic drugs. The student will not be able to orientate with these drugs in their system. And many of the phonics-related programs will say, well, the Davis program doesn't have enough research to back it up, which is not true. We have had more than 9 independently published research studies performed on the Davis program because of its fabulous results. The Orton-Gillingham programs only have one research study that they heavily rely on, and in that research study, there were no children that were identified as dyslexic in that research study. Okay, a couple statistics: 20% of the population has a reading disability. No one will dispute this. 20% of the population is dyslexic, and no one will dispute that statistic either. But however, that's not 40%. That's not a new group of people. That is the same 20%. There is a 20% illiteracy rate in the United States, which sounds like a very high number considering the fact that we're a developed country. And 75% of the students who are poor readers in third grade will remain poor readers in high school. The reason for this is in first and second grade, the students are taught how to read. From third grade on, they have to read to learn. And again, if they did not learn the phonics-based lessons that were taught to them, and they cannot read, their grade levels behind in their reading, what's going to happen is they will continue to lag behind the other students in their classrooms. So if you believe that this program is appropriate for your child, the next step would be the assessment. The assessment will take about 2.5 hours. I'll work with your student for about an hour. I will have them do a little exercise to determine if they're a multidimensional thinker. I'll ask them about 30 questions about themselves, and I'll have them do just a little bit of reading. Then I will excuse you into the next room, and I will ask you those same questions that I asked the child earlier without them hearing us. That takes about 2.5 hours. Then the program, the 1-week program, is a 30-hour program. I need a 6.5-hour day with your child. So the child is usually dropped off at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and will be picked up at 3:30 in the afternoon. They need to bring their sack lunch. I have a microwave and a refrigerator in the office, and we will work for an hour. We will take a 10-minute break about every hour. We'll take a half-hour break for lunch, and then we'll get right back to work. At the end of the day, when you pick up the student, you'll be able to see what they had done during the day, and I will answer any questions that you will have about what they did during the day. And then on Friday afternoon is when the support person, whether it be a parent or another adult, will be the person that will be working with that child. I will spend 4 hours with that individual, indicating what that student had done during the week and what needs to be done post-program. And what I'm talking about after the program is the 20 minutes of reading a day and 2 words in clay per day, the koosh ball exercises, and maybe how we begin to incorporate this into their spelling words and their reading exercises in school and whatnot. So we'll go over all that at support training on Friday afternoon. Post-program follow-up, what I have set up is 6 hours of post-program work where you and your student will come back and we will update. You'll update me on the progress that you are doing, the modeling the words in clay, the symbol mastery, the reading exercises, the koosh balls type of a thing. Let me know how school's going. I may share with you some strategies for working with the student in the classroom and whatnot, and helpful tips to get you through the school year or get you through the summer. These are the materials that you will go home with. And by the way, post-program follow-up is the hardest thing to do, because what happens is the student is doing very well at school, usually getting A's in their spelling tests and whatnot, and you know, parents are busy. We've got all sorts of extracurricular activities that are keeping these students busy. And as a result, quite frankly, they say, well, you know, everything's doing well, and sometimes we just don't have time for that follow-up. But please, please, please stick with the follow-up so that we can keep in touch and you know, keep up with modeling the words in clay. Okay, some people want to know what we do within that 30-hour schedule. First is the orientation counseling, which is the visual orientation counseling. We'll stop the letters from flipping, jumping, and moving. And then we're going to practice that a couple times so they know what it feels like to be oriented and disoriented. Then I'm going to teach them a couple of other tools. And then what we're going to do is we're going to construct the uppercase alphabet in clay. And then we're going to de-trigger that uppercase alphabet using our visual orientation. And again, the problem for the dyslexic, because first of all, the letters are doing something funny, so we correct that with the orientation counseling. Then we go through and we de-trigger that alphabet so that we're certain that none of the letters are playing any tricks on us. Then we have to go through and we construct the lowercase alphabet in clay, and we do the same thing. We de-trigger the lowercase alphabet because these are different characters than the uppercase alphabet. Then we go through and make the punctuation marks in clay, and we de-trigger those punctuation marks. Then we start with the reading steps, and then we do our kinesthetic orientation, and then we learn how to do our kinesthetic orientation with the koosh balls. And then we go through and we do our auditory orientation, and then we go through with the pronunciation to make sure that pronunciation isn't creating a disorientation for us as well. Then again, if your student doesn't have dictionary skills, I need to teach that to them. And then we start modeling words in clay. We start with a noun, a verb, and an adjective. And then we start performing symbol mastery on some of those trigger words in clay. If I have time with a student, we'll work on some of the advanced concepts of self, change, consequence, and time. Quite frequently, I like to, if the child doesn't have or the student doesn't have a great concept of time, I'd like to go into the concept of time with the student. So, because this will help them certainly with their reading and understand math and music as well. So again, like to try to get to that concept if at all possible. And then, of course, for Friday afternoon support training. Okay, at the end of every seminar, I always receive this question. Do I need to have my student tested by a psychiatrist to determine if they are dyslexic? The answer is there is no one test for dyslexia. There's not a file folder that a psychiatrist will pull out of their file and say, if you pass this test or if you flunk this test, you're dyslexic. Basically, what we're looking for with dyslexia is we're looking for those the 37 characteristics that we talked about earlier. And who knows your child better than you? You can have academic tests run by the schools. You can pay for an IQ test. You can have psychoeducational screening done on those 37 characteristics. But once again, who knows your child better than you? These tests in the Grand Rapids area can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 if you choose. And remember, the schools cannot diagnose dyslexia. Because of No Child Left Behind in America's with Disabilities Act, every school has to have a program for each disability that they diagnose. And because they do not have a program that will correct dyslexia, in other words, because they're still using the phonic-based programs, they cannot correct dyslexia. So they will not be able to diagnose your child as dyslexic. So once again, your options are you can go to any other program out there and you will receive more phonics. Sometimes they will hide it in different ways, but basically the main core of the program will always be phonics. You can go to some very expensive schools where they will teach the child what they call remediation, where I was describing that before as having scribes write for your child or take notes for your child, or using assistive technological devices in order to help your child along. Or again, you can come here and your child can learn some tools to make learning easier for them. If you have not already, I'd like for you to make sure that you take the online test that's located on my website. And if you can, let me know how your student fared, if they were mild, moderate, or severely dyslexic. Also, you will find some interesting information on dyslexia on my Facebook page. Sorry about that. So once again, hello, here I am. Thanks for watching part 2 of this seminar on dyslexia. Please contact me for any questions that you may have regarding this seminar, or some clarifications that you would like to have understood as a result of listening to this seminar. And or if you'd like to set up an assessment for your student, we can do that. And just let me know you've watched the seminar, and we can get your child going on the assessment, which would be the next step in correcting their dyslexia. I hope you enjoyed this. I'd love to hear your feedback if you can provide that for me, and have a wonderful day.